Good morning if you're in California or on the West Coast. Good afternoon for those of you who are on the East Coast. My name is Angelique Keys, and I'm a senior consultant here at Suka Strategic Solutions. We are very excited to host this webinar today. And Amy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Amy Silver, and I'm a consultant with Suka Strategic Solutions. I have an extensive background helping organizations measure and communicate their impact. I've been writing grants and reports for more years than I'd like to count. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks.
No problem. We are very excited to host this webinar today. I know that for many of the nonprofits out here, we're all witnessing how the landscape of funding is changing. And I know we receive a lot of requests for just insight and input from Sukup Strategic Solutions. This webinar is actually a spinoff of an article that we produced a couple months ago, and that got so much traction that we figured we'd follow it up with this webinar. So we're going to dive in. If you're just joining us, drop where you're from and where you're located, which organization and where you're located in the chat. And then Amy, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Yeah, we're gonna kick things off with something everybody loves, which is an icebreaker. But this is nothing scary, I promise. If you wouldn't mind, if you want to head to the link in the chat and just share, if you will, one word that comes to mind when you hear the word outcomes. There's truly no pressure here. I'll just keep talking while you're clicking that link. Your word, it could be something like metrics or success or data or stress. Or even just whatever pops into your head first is totally fair game. And trust me, we have heard it all. This is just going to be a quick way for us to take the temperature of the room and how you're all feeling about this topic before we dive in. So I'll give you guys a few seconds to respond, to think and respond.
We're seeing results be like the number one right now. I think that's where many of our minds go.
Yep.
Stressful. It can be. It can be. Okay, I'm seeing some in the chat. Measurable results, impact,
Yep.
Tracking, hard to report. I think someone wrote, ugh. It can be an ugh.
They like that suggestion.
It can be an ugh, yes. Results. Accountability, I like that one. That's good. Execution. These are some good words.
Stressful, I relate to.
It can be.
Right.
Hopefully
Okay,
after this webinar, it's not as stressful.
So look, hopefully some of you, and it looks like it from what has come in, might feel pretty confident about measuring outcomes, and you've got a system and you've been doing it for a while. And others might feel like it's very mysterious and it's really like a funder-driven puzzle that you're trying to solve. And that is also valid. But here's our promise when it comes to outcomes. By the end of the session, it's our goal to take some of that pressure off. That we're going to give you a clear, practical way to think about outcomes and what they are, why they matter, and how you talk about them in ways that really resonate with funders and reflect the good work you're already doing. So let's move on. Great.
So now we're going to put up a poll, and this will help us kind of tailor what we touch on today. You should see a pop-up on your screen. If you don't see a pop-up, go ahead and drop it in the chat. What is the biggest challenge that you face when it comes to outcomes? Is it defining outcomes clearly, tracking the data with limited time staff, reporting results effectively, or aligning outcomes with funder priorities? We'll give everybody a few seconds to respond. Okay, we're seeing some trends here. And again, if you can't, for some reason the pop-up's not working for you, feel free to drop it in the chat. Nice. Aligning outcomes with funder priorities. That's not super surprising. Reporting results effectively. Nice. And we're seeing a mixed bag of things. I think if there was an option for all of the above, we may have seen that be our number one answer. We'll give it a few more seconds and then. Perfect. Well, thank you guys for responding. So we do see a trend towards aligning outcomes with funder priorities. That is not surprising. But I think it's also a mixed bag of defining how do you clearly define those outcomes, even if you're trying to align them with funder priorities. And as we all know, in the nonprofit world, there's never enough time, staff, or resources. So I know for a lot of organizations, especially some of the smaller organizations that we work with, having the tools and the resources to do that, having the infrastructure in place to track those results and not have to do it manually or spend hours in data, or also just how you're tracking that data, how you're getting that feedback from whatever services that you're delivering to the community can be a great challenge. Now, we're going to talk about why funders care about outcomes. That's the whole purpose of this. And especially as we look at grant funding, we look at major gifts and donations, even down to legacy gifts and estate gifts, what funders really want to see and why it matters to them. So for some funders, it is just to help them measure return on investment. We're giving you, it can be transactional. We're giving you this amount of money. We want to see our money do something. We want to see our money go somewhere. But for a lot of funders, it goes deeper than that, especially as we move into times like now where funders are leaning in more to trust-based philanthropy, working with the partners that they've already worked with. We do see some funders that we talk to, they may have been funding an organization year after year after year after year, and they start to wonder, like, are we really continuing to make the impact? Should we invest more? Should we pull back and spread our dollars out across more nonprofits? As the financial landscape and just the entire landscape of the U.S. continues to change, it is becoming increasingly more competitive for funder dollars right now. Funders also are accountable to their boards, so to their own boards, donors, and stakeholders. We do hear that a lot from funders, that they have to be able to answer to those who are either giving the money to them, if they're a community foundation, or if they're a venture capitalist group who's then turning around, or philanthropic venture group, I should say, that's turning around and pouring money back into the community. They also want to see that what they're doing is really mattering. Sometimes you have nonprofits who receive funds and it just goes into overhead and you never really see the trickle down, or they're not having as big of an impact or as large of an impact that they could have. Another way is or another reason that we heard is that you're helping funders tell their own success stories. So they want to be able to walk away from the relationship or the partnership with the nonprofit and know that whatever their purpose was in investing these dollars into the community, there's very few donors that just make a gift for tax purposes these days. They're looking to move the needle in one way or another on something that is important to them, or they really want to see change on. And so they want to be able to tell their story, as well as have that positive outcome on whatever the impact they're looking to have is. And then, Amy, do you want to talk about some of the common mistakes that nonprofits make when they're reporting on outcomes?
Definitely. So not to lead with the negative, but before we talk about how to do this well, I think it's important to take some time to name some of the common pitfalls we see when it comes to measuring and reporting outcomes. And on this, I want to be really clear. These are incredibly common. And if you've made some of them before, you're 100% not alone. We've all been there. This is not about perfection. This is about progress. So let's walk through a few of the big ones. Confusing outputs and outcomes. This is probably the most common one. We're used to saying things like, we serve 500 people, which is great. It shows that you were active, but what changed for these people? And so a better way to frame it might be 80% of the participants reported improved coping skills after the program. Funders want to hear about change, not just reach. Using vague language. This is probably very obvious, but words like better or more or improved, they sound positive, but without numbers or context, they really don't tell us much. So if you say participants felt better, a funder may be thinking better than what, or compared to what, or how do you know? So here, specificity is going to be your friend. Ignoring funder priorities. This happens when we get caught up telling our story without considering their goals. Every funder has certain keywords, themes, or priorities that they care about. You might hear things like economic mobility or health equity or youth development. And if you can connect your outcomes to their language, your proposal becomes much more compelling. Lacking baseline data. This one's tricky, but it's critical. So if you don't know where your participants started, it's hard to know how far they've come. So funders like seeing change over time, and even a simple pre-programmed survey can help you track and demonstrate that kind of growth. No data collection plan. You can't report what you didn't plan to measure. So build in your data tools early, and that might mean quick surveys, reflection exercises, informal interviews, whatever works for your team and your program and your participants. And the important thing is to just be intentional about it from the start. Only sharing success stories. Stories are important. They humanize our work, but on their own, they're not enough. But when you pair a compelling quote with strong outcome data, that's the sweet spot. So for example, 90% of teens reported self-esteem after the program, and one participant said, "Now I believe I can actually go to college." So to me, that's a more powerful statement. Prioritizing quantity over quality. This one, it's easy to focus on big numbers. We served 1,000 people, but without context, that doesn't actually say much. And funders want to know what those 1,000 people actually gained. Did their skills improve? Did their stress go down? Did something meaningful shift? So let me give
Amy,
you, oh, sure.
oh, I was just going to chime in.
Yeah.
One of the things that we often notice when we work with some of our nonprofit clients, and that I've noticed when I work with nonprofits, and even in my own growth as a fundraising professional, is often not understanding the difference between output, outcomes, and impact. That tends to be
Yeah.
a
It's
big one
confusing.
that we mix in. So when we talk about outputs, that's basically what you're doing. We're going to host 80 workshops. We're going to host 3 community engagement events. That is not an outcome. That is going to be an output. That is what you are doing as an organization. That tells us nothing. So you held it. Now what? Outcomes is going to be what is the result of that. So if we're an organization and we're going to host 12 financial literacy workshops, that's great. We held these workshops. People came to them, hopefully. But what happened? What did they get out of that? Did it make any difference in those individuals' lives? So that's going to be the output. When we report on the outcomes, we're going to say we held 80 workshops or we held 12 workshops, and from this 200 people gain information on financial literacy, or 200 people improve their financial literacy understanding or their budgeting capability. That's going to be our outcome. And the impact of that is we've seen a 5% increase in the number of households that were able to save a certain amount of money. And that's going to be the impact. So we want to talk about, yes, true impact can be hard to measure. There's actually a tool that some of the nonprofits or the funders have moved towards called True Impact, where they're asking you to not only set SMART goals, but to track what that output, what that activity is going to be, what the outcome of that activity is going to be, and then what is the long-term impact. I actually met with a funder yesterday who's a big funder here in California, especially in the Bay Area, and we are getting ready to submit a grant for them. And one of the things she said was, we so often get nonprofits that are going to do something. They're going to get all these people together. They're going to have this community engagement event, or they're going to bring all of these clients in for a workshop. And then the clients leave, and what? You gave them the information, and what? Did it change anything? Did it make a difference? Did it make a difference 6 months from now? It's certain things like, yes, like food, giving out rent vouchers, transportation vouchers. Those are very basic, easy ways. They were able to get from point A to point B. They had a nutritious meal. But if you're doing something like nutrition workshops, you're going to need to figure out a way to show the outcomes of those workshops and the impact of that over time. Did it improve their health? Were they making healthier decisions with what they were eating? Were they buying healthier groceries and meals? And so that's where you really want to try to figure out, and this is sometimes a good exercise for your team, to sit back and look at what you do and say, okay, here's the impact that we look to have. Here's what we're doing. What are the outcomes? If you cannot clearly define those 3 areas, you may need to spend some time working on what your goals are, making sure you're setting the right goals, but then also making sure that you can clearly report on each of these areas and identify what those benchmarks are. It's going to make your grant writing easier. Your funders are going to like it more. It's going to be able to show what you're doing and also let you know if you're doing the right things.
Thank you. Let's, you know what, to that, since Angelique mentioned SMART goals, let's move on to that. Are we on that? Yeah, there we go. Okay. So this is a terrific tool. And I think it's really one of the best ones out there for creating a strong funder friendly outcome. Some of you may have seen it before. You may have even used it in strategic planning or program design, but it's very well worth visiting through the lens of outcomes. So let's just go through what each of these mean for SMART. So specific is, like what Angelique said, what exactly are you trying to change, right? Measurable, how will you know if it changed? Achievable, is the goal even realistic given your team, your time, or your budget? Relevant, does the goal align with your mission and your funder's priorities? Those 2 things are really important to take a look at. And time bound, when will you measure the result? So here's what that looks like quickly in practice. So if your organization supports workforce development, you might say, or you might be tempted to say, we want to improve job readiness in our participants, which is great. That's an amazing goal, but that's really broad. So a SMART version might sound a little more like this: increase job placement rate from 40% to 60% within 12 months. So then it points to the goal being clear, that it's measurable, that it's time bound, and then it's directly tied to something that the funder cares about, which are employment outcomes. So, and here's a pro tip. So if you're drafting these goals for a proposal, I tend to, and I think it's always good practice, to mirror the funder's language, right? If they're talking about economic mobility and health equity or resilience, if those words are coming up in their literature, try to reflect that back in your goals. And it shows not only alignment, but also that you've done your homework. Let's see. Let's move on. I'll send it back to Angelique.
Thank you. So when we talk about, I see some of, I saw a question pop into the chat about pre and post testing, perhaps. So we're going to talk about the tools for tracking outcomes, but I think it's also how you're going to collect that data. So not just the tracking of the data, but also how you're going to collect it. So pre and post testing is a great way, especially when you're trying to gauge if you're delivering education, if you're delivering resources, if clients are coming to you for a particular service. Sometimes perception alone can be very difficult to track at the end if you don't track in the beginning. So I'll give you guys an example. An organization I work with does violence intervention work and prevention work for high school and middle schoolers, where the high schoolers go into the middle schools and they present a curriculum on violence prevention and violence intervention. And they were struggling with, like, yes, these students, 90 middle schoolers came and sat for this workshop. And our funders were coming back and saying, okay, that's great. So what did that do for them? And so what they started doing was surveying the students before and after the workshops. And so in this case, one of the questions that they asked was, before the workshop, how likely are you to talk a friend out of carrying a gun? And then at the end, they asked the same question. And what they were able to track is that before the workshop versus after, they saw 36% improvement in the number of kids who were saying that they were willing to talk a friend out of carrying a gun than before. And so that is something that they tracked, and they would track it year over year. So they would continue to develop the curriculum, and they would be able to show if there's dips, if there's increases in the number of youth, if it varied, if sixth graders were more likely to say, oh yeah, coming in, and eighth graders had a different perspective. And they were able to break that data down even further. I know there are a lot of tools that track data. If you are an organization that receives funding from municipalities, from federal systems, or sometimes they come with their own systems, which will track everything great down to demographics and gender identity and zip codes and all of that. You don't have to have the fanciest of tools to track your data. I'm a spreadsheet girly. You give me a spreadsheet and put me in a corner, I'm as happy as can be.
I agree.
So spreadsheets are a great way, as always, to track your data. Google Forms. There are some newer tools like Airtables. I'm always going to be a go-to SurveyMonkey person. I think that's a very easy and sometimes affordable way to track data, to send out information, and also get surveys. It's often, even if your client is not always the one to do the survey, sometimes you can survey staff and get staff feedback. You can, if you work with schools or other partners, to get their feedback. Do you have other ways, Amy, that you can think of off the top of your head that you've seen some of our clients track their outcomes?
Sure. No, I think it's really important to what you pointed out is that there really isn't one way to go, right? I think we get tripped up in doing something the right way. But even as you mentioned, staff surveys or staff feedback, especially if you have programs for individuals or children who have developmental disabilities, and you're not going to get a lot of feedback necessarily from the children or the participants in terms of surveys, you might from a caregiver, but also it's going to be, you want to be able to report observations from professionals, right? Because if you have internal professional goals and markers that you want these folks to, to get to throughout the program, those are all going to be something that the staff is keeping track of, and that's valuable. Don't count it out just because it's observational or it's not the actual client. I think that's a really important story to tell, and even be able to, if you can, compare them to each other, right? If parents are saying, if while they're doing therapeutic riding, there may have been I guess, sitting up, or their posture is better, or they're having better, muscular control. If those things are also being seen at home, or they're verbal in one setting and then also again in another, I think those things are really important to compare, and they show that you're really having a broad impact, and that the program works.
And then I just want to touch on, I saw that, I think it's Ronnie had a question in in our Q&A that says it appears funders want short-term outcomes. And when you're more, and we are more systemic, and than what requires quarterly outcomes. This is actually not uncommon when what you're doing or the service you're delivering is something that it doesn't take, you can't report every 3 months. In 3 months, we haven't really seen any true impact happening. It'll take a year, it'll take 2 years kind of thing. I keep going back, and I know for some of you this may not be relevant, but say for instance, literacy. You're working with youth and you're doing literacy education, and there's not going to be much impact in 3 months. You're not going to see a kid go from a 3rd grade reading level to a 4th grade reading level in 3 months. But what you want to do, or what you can do, and what I often suggest, is that you tier your metrics. So you kind of do this like horizon of, at 3 months, we're going to focus on smaller goals. We're going to focus on our reach. We're going to focus on our enrollment. We're going to focus on how long a kid is reading. So are they reading for 10 minutes uninterrupted? When they came in, they were only reading for 5. That's going to be like a milestone that I can track in 3 months. Are they showing more interest? Are they showing more engagement in the type of books they're reading? I can survey the child and say, like, how many books have you read this month, or how many books are we getting through, how many pages are we getting through in a session, to kind of track some smaller and have something to report on quarterly. And then we're going to go into the 6 months. Where are they at 6 months? Are they coming in and reading on their own for longer, or are they still requiring the same amount of I hate to say hand holding, same amount of attention from whoever's delivering the tutoring or the literacy education to them? Then we're going to do our end of year, where we're showing, have they gone from a 3.3 reading level to a 4? Same thing. I'm going to pick on NTRC again because Amy talked about them. When you have someone who's coming in and you talk about their therapeutic writing development, you may not see that after month 1 or even month 3, but are they showing a more willingness to participate? Are they more excited when they show up? Are their parents reporting that when they come and they're not as fearful of the horse, or they're more engaging with the trainer? Those are the kinds of things that you can show, and you can say, 60% of our riders, when they come, they're scared to even touch the horse. And what we're seeing is that by the 3-month mark, not only are they touching them, but they're willing to, ride them. They're willing to at least get on. And so you can start to do this horizon, and Sukup offers free consultations all the time. This is something that we work with. It's also good. This is a great way to engage your board. I sit on boards. I also have worked for and reported to boards. And so sometimes I'll bring them in and we'll have sessions to be like, okay, here's what we're trying to figure out how we can report on our numbers better. What are some ideas? And you'll find when you get a bunch of people around the table, all of a sudden everybody's brain starts churning and everybody has a ton of ideas. Also, don't be afraid to ask your funders. So if you have, maybe not necessarily the person you're applying to or reporting to on this specific metric, but if you have relationships with funders or donors, this is a great way to pull them in and allow them to give them something other than their treasure. We always say people give time, talent, treasure. This is a way to pull them in. And I've actually found that when you have these kind of conversations with your donors and your funders, not only do you get some really insightful information because they're telling you what they want to know and what they would want to see as a donor and a funder, but you're also going to deepen that relationship because now they're coming in as a trusted thought partner and not just a donor. Amy, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. It's really about, really what you were saying is really thinking outside of the box, right? And even just documenting all of these efforts that you're making to gather data, right? Of course, the, quantifiable data is, quantitative data is the easy, those are attendance records and things like that. But there are lots of different ways to get thoughts and feelings, and asking in different ways. And don't poo-poo something because it's not through like an official form or table or whatnot. I think it's great just to really try to gather as much information as you can and also share what you're doing, right? All of those interviews that you're doing, whether it's with your board or whether it's participants or whether it's with caregivers or whatever it might be. And honestly, even if you can try to figure, I'm thinking about workforce development, if you're able to set up checkpoints to find out progress after a participant leaves the program, right? Even those efforts to show that you are staying in touch with partners in the work to see that, like, kids are really moving through this program. The impact is really being felt. It's actually working. They're not just graduating the program and saying that they, gained a greater interest in telecommunications positions, but actually, if you can do some check-ins with business partners, a little bit harder with participants, especially if you're talking with younger people, they tend to disappear once they already have the program under their belt. But those are really important efforts to make as well.
Thank you for that. And you touched on a good point. You always want to have both quantitative and qualitative data. So we want to have the numbers, but we do want to find a healthy balance for your organization of what, not just the numbers, but what the individuals who are on the recipients of your services are also reporting back. Another good thing that you can sometimes track is your reach. As you continue to deepen the work you're doing, are you diversifying? Are you hitting the target demographics? I'm looking at, sorry, Stacey, to pick on you, but Orlando Museum of Art, are you seeing with the different types of artwork you're bringing in, or the type of exhibits you're putting on, are you seeing the number of individuals coming in and the demographics of individuals being more reflective of the actual community and population? We know there's a big push for equity. We know that there's a big push for racial inclusion and gender inclusion. And for sometimes it's even for making sure that we're touching all ages across the community. So being able to report on that and saying, you know, we did this different, or we brought in this many more XYZ, and it actually resulted in a 20% increase in reaching the senior population that we weren't seeing. Those are also outcomes. The biggest thing that I see organizations do sometimes that can be a challenge for them is biting off more that they can chew. Remember, you want to start with what you can maintain. And you want to continue to grow and you want to continue to build, but you know your team, you know their capacity. And so you want to make sure that you're not collecting all this data that you just cannot synthesize. You need to make sure that you're starting with what you can maintain and what your organization can handle and what's right for your organization. If it's right for your organization to go out and invest in this amazing data collection software that's going to generate all these results for you, then great. But if it's not right for you, then don't. You know, make sure that you really think about what's going to be meaningful and what's going to be what's the word I'm looking for? Meaningful, and what's going to work for your organization in the long term, and that someone's really going to have the time to work for and report on. With that, we'll talk about reporting and good versus great reporting. This kind of touches on the outcomes, or the outputs. Good reporting, like Amy said, we served 200 people. That's great. That is great that 200 people came and got food from your organization. I love that for them. That is very important. Great would be we provided 200 individuals with a nutritious and healthy meal and nutrition and education. What is the word I'm looking for? We provided 200 people with, or we reduced food insecurity with 200 people by providing 3 days worth of groceries. That's a better way to provide metrics, but you want to follow that up with 80% of those individuals reported that because of their visit to the food pantry, they will blah, 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 whatever it's going to be. Funders want to see an evidence of change, not just effort. It is great that you produce this activity for the community, but what did it change? What happened? I will say this becomes more challenging, and I want to make sure I'm touching on not just nonprofits that are delivering something to clients, but if you're an organization that's in policy or advocacy or power building or collective movements per se, this can be a bit more challenging. So you get these people together, you're building this kind of like power building coalition, and then what? They got together, they had a great community engagement event, and then they just all left and went home, and that's it. That's where you have to figure out, no, what they did was then we took this, we brought the policymakers and we brought the residents together, and there was meaningful conversation about XYZ that then turned into 5 new youth leaders, 4 new community advocates, 3 more listening sessions. You want to be able to show this kind of cause and effect. What impact is that going to have? Sorry, I thought there was another question. It's not. The other thing is saying, like going back to the we serve 200 people, it's important, but it's just the beginning. You always want to say what you changed as a result. So I sometimes will work backwards. I will work backwards from what is the result we say we're having. If you have individuals in your organization that write grants, you know, we talk a lot about those results. We don't just say, oh, we're going to do 200. We submit paragraphs long of we're going to have meaningful change and this and this and this and this is going to happen. So I sometimes will start on that end. We are looking to reduce homelessness or provide housing security for blah, 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 blah. And then I'm going to work backwards. So we're going to do that by doing this and this and this and this. So then I'm kind of building, instead of starting with, we're going to provide housing for 4 people. That's great. But what is that going to provide? That's going to provide stability. How is that going to impact their children? How is that going to impact their family unit? How is that going to impact their job stability? Things like that. You want to look at what those long-term outcomes are, and sometimes it does help to build backwards. And you always want to make sure that it's very clear and you're not getting too lofty, because sometimes funders will come back and they will say, okay, like, well, how do you know you did that? Where are you getting this data from? And the last thing you want to do is put your foot in your mouth and like, well, we just thought we did. No, you always want to have the reports to back it up. Sometimes what I've seen with organizations that we've worked with, it actually hurts them that they're not reporting on the true impact. They may say, or they're not tracking the right numbers. They may say, we served 20 clients this year with, I don't know, some kind of workshop. But what they could have done and probably had a better outcome is if they provided 20 workshops and each workshop was 2 hours long and there were 100 clients. If you do the math, 28 clients versus we provided 1,700 hours of blah, blah, blah education to the community. Right. That hits different when you're talking to a funder. That hits way different. And so when you look at your numbers, you want to think about what the true impact you're making, but also what the resources and what the actual output is of what those clients are receiving and what the community is receiving. Amy, did you have something you wanted to add to the Good vs. Great reporting?
Yeah. Well, actually, you know what? This kind of moves right into the slide that's up right now. So for telling a better story, you know, I think everything that Angelique was saying is right. And then I think to take it one step further, it's more than even just showing what happened, right? You have the data and it shows what happened, but then you're also talking about, which is what Angelique pointed to, like, why does it matter, right? Like, so how do you tell that better story? And how do you make your outcomes come to life and in a very funder friendly way? And also without making it harder on your team, right? So that's part of it as well. And I think that's a key point that we're trying to allude to earlier, to not invest in big tools or, not get in over your head, like Angelique mentioned. Don't bite off more than you can chew. But I think what's really important is, talking about I kind of look at it in 3 ways, right? Like, first is giving your data a voice. So instead of stopping at the percentage, which we've talked to a lot, what does that number mean for real people? So like we made the reference to therapeutic riding, this can be an example. So 90% of caregivers felt more confident managing their child's health needs after completing our training, right? So that's amazing. And then adding to that, you can say something like this. You can add a quote. Before this, I used to panic with every fever. Now I know exactly what to do, right? So you're like pairing a statistic with a story, and that brings it all together. So that's kind of moving it to the next level of the data, interpreting the data, and now, giving it a voice. I think also thinking about telling a story visually. Simple bar charts are really useful. A timeline, a photo, those things can go a really long way. I've seen organization use quick before and after photos of, geographic reach, anything that you can illustrate and see the change, and not just read about it. And, third, I think this is something that I remind myself to do all the time. Be honest about the messy stuff, right? Because that is part of the story. There's no way everything went perfectly swimmingly. And I think it's okay to admit what didn't work. I think funders respect that. It's thoughtful reflection. And it's okay to say that a pilot program didn't meet all its goals, right? It was a pilot. Tell them what you're going to adjust moving forward and, what you learned. And I think that shows the ability to pivot, to be adaptable, and really like this deeper commitment to the overall impact. Funders, they want to partner with organizations that are making a difference and that are also learning as they go. So, just make sure that when you share your results, they're clear, there's humility, and, there's purpose, and you're not just, checking a box.
I will also say, Amy, one of the things that a lot of nonprofits kind of don't take to their advantage is reaching out to past recipients of their services or past individuals who were impacted by their services often. And I know this is very difficult to do because we're often so focused on the services that we're delivering now that we don't capture that true long impact of where that client, that if you're a community foundation, where that organization is that got a grant from you 5 years ago, or that got a grant from you for 3 years or funding from you, or that that youth that came to your program or that family that was in your program 5 years back. But every now and again, it is nice to go, not only for your staff and for your team who can see where they are and how awesome they're doing, or how, but also that's a great way to collect that long-term data. Even if you don't touch base with every single client, if you were to able to touch base with 10 to 20 of your previous clients or of your alumni, and to just get at least a response of a survey, you would be able to say, if not, you don't have to touch everybody, but you can say 30% of those that responded to the survey reported XYZ, reported that they actually are in a better financial position, that they've maintained security when it came to housing, that they actually improved their overall health, that they are in a stronger financial position because of their time with da, 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 da. So you don't always have to touch all 100% of everyone that you've served. Even if you can only get a small sample size and you only get a few responses, those percentages still matter, and those can help build in that long-term impact of maybe someone, a year is not enough time. Maybe that true impact and being able to say that, like, for the past 3 years, we reached out to previous recipients, and what we've seen is that because of their time at such and such, they actually improved blah, 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 blah over a 3-year period. We're not only having an impact now, whatever we're delivering now is having an immediate impact. It gave them the tools to continue to be successful. And when you can report that kind of impact, that long after they leave us and we're not serving them anymore, because of whatever we did here, it actually impacted the trajectory of their future and improved their lives, or continue to move the needle. And funders will not only appreciate the impact that they were able to have long term, they're going to appreciate the evidence that whatever you're delivering, we're doing it because it works. Or actually, we changed it because what we realized, it has no impact on them, or we were no longer servicing them. Because sometimes clients, they're going to tell you nice stuff because they just want you to keep servicing them. They don't want to hurt your feelings. But when you talk to someone who's 2 years, 3 years removed from whatever you're delivering or whatever service they're providing, they can actually say, like, no, I didn't find that helpful. Actually, it didn't make any impact at all. And then you're like, oh, we were just spinning our wheels in the mud. It actually, no one cared about that. And you can report back on that. And it is nice, and funders love to hear that you're evaluating the work that you're delivering to make sure that it's relevant and that it's actually having impact. And if you find that we were investing so many resources or so much staff time, or we were delivering the services and clients actually didn't need it, or they didn't want it, or it really wasn't making a difference, so we pivoted, and now we're doing XYZ, or we only offer that optionally, or we've decided to no longer move forward with that program because what we were seeing is what it was costing us and what the actual benefit of it was. Our resources are better put over into this program. And that's not only effective for you as an organization, but it shows that you as an organization are operating like a business, and also evaluating the return on investment for not only you as an organization, but for the client and their time or whatever service that you're delivering. Did you have
one more thing to that, just to the thought about pivoting. I think there's two pieces of that. It just made me think of, there's, of course, after the program has been completed and any feedback that you've gotten, and that would maybe inform your work going forward. But I think it's also important to let funders know, and even as an organization, it's going to help you. At what points are you checking in midpoint so you can course correct? Don't think that just because you got funding specifically in a certain way that you have to stick to it, even if you know it's not working. If the funding is flexible, you can make those changes on your own. If it's inflexible, before making those changes, there is nothing wrong with reaching out to a funder mid-cycle and ask for their permission to move money from one stream to another. And if they know it's because you're constantly checking in with your service recipients, I've never run into a problem where a funder hasn't said, makes perfect sense. It just really needs to be, kind of an official touch point. But I think it's really not just at the end, but also to be able to pivot and course correct, mid-cycle as well.
Yes. So we're gonna we have a few more slides, and I want to make sure that we give an opportunity for everyone who is with us. If you have questions, if you have points that you would still like us to touch on, if you have something where it's like this is unique to our organization and we just don't know what to do with this, please drop it in the Q&A or in the chat, and we're gonna have a few minutes to touch base on those. One of the things that I want to also mention, and I forgot to mention when we talked about tools and how to capture data, is that as a nonprofit, we know your resources are limited, and often none of us have an endless supply of funding, although we wish we did. Be sure to take advantage of things like TechSoup, which provides discounts for certain software. If you're on different listservs for nonprofits, or you have local nonprofit resource centers, talk to your colleagues, talk to other nonprofits about what they're using and what they're doing. Talk to each other. That is often, I've gotten some of the best tools in my career from talking to other nonprofits, looking at other nonprofits. If you've ever been in higher education, there's this group called CASE. It's like the Council for something on Education. We used to call it Copy and Steal Everything. I always look at other nonprofits who are similar to do similar work across, not just in my state, not just in my region. I look across the nation, and I will see what are they reporting on? What metrics do they have that I'm like, dang, that's good. Why didn't I think of that? One of the things, like for me, you mentioned Amy, was like how telling it a different way, not just writing numbers. I was doing some research, looking at similar nonprofits, and saw an infographic that blew my mind. I'm not even a funder for this nonprofit, but it blew my mind. And I was like, dang, they really hit the mark with that one. And so that is where I get some of my best ideas, is looking at what other nonprofits are doing well, especially other nonprofits that do similar work to you. That can be such I don't want to say a wishing well, but a well of information to say, like, I really like that, or how did they capture that, or oh, we didn't think about that. That is one of like my ultimate go-tos, is to do research in that realm. And then as far as key takeaways for today, we really, really hope that you guys from this webinar understand the difference between outputs, outcomes, and impacts. That the importance of setting SMART goals, that is probably still one of the biggest challenges for me. Sometimes I think they're smart, and then I go back to report on them and I'm like, dang, that's actually not measurable, or how do we measure that, or let's just scrap that altogether. But if you can get to those SMART goals, I promise you it makes setting those outcomes so much easier. Using simple tools, as complicated as this sounds, numbers and surveys, I will say, are probably still and will always be the like anchor to outcomes and effective reporting. Make sure you report clearly. Continue to tell stories. This does not replace the impact of storytelling. There's always a good balance to both those stories that pull the heartstrings, that really tell how one individual or one organization were served. Okay, I'll get to that, Carol. And being able to tell story with your data. So I saw a question pop in: the best free or affordable tool to track grants in place of Excel. Ooh, that's a good one.
I
So
think, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, a lot of software companies will offer discounts, just so you know, to nonprofit organizations for tracking tools. But they're not all, it depends on what kind of an organization you are, but it may be worthwhile checking some of the bigger names in terms of, data tracking, like, even donor software, right? Like Donor Perfect and things like that. Those are decent at, some of them have tools and add-ons where you can track data, and that way you can easily run reports, and it matches up with, funders, and they can all sort of be produced in the same way. But I would definitely check with what you have already in terms of maybe donor software or other databases, and see if they can give you a discount, and see if they can also, kind of wrap a reporting module into what you already have.
I will say too, and I am working for SUCUP, we always love to see when you can have Salesforce, when you can have Razor's Edge, when you can have Donor Perfect with the grant management tool built into it. But I know for a lot of nonprofits that is not feasible. I will say I'm a fundraising professional, but if anybody's been a fundraising professional, you're nothing but a project manager. Project management software is very, very good if your organization cannot afford a grant tracking platform. I have used Airtable. I've worked with clients who use Asana, who use Monday.com, where you can easily have you can easily get one user for $20 a month. It can be very effective for teams to use those until they hit a point, if they need to hit a point where they have a donor software. But I will say my favorites are Asana. If you are okay with an online platform, Monday.com, and then Airtable, just because it allows you to build it out and really track it like a project, track reporting, assign them out to different users. It can be effective. Some of them function like a fancy Excel, but I found that they do work better than Excel. And it is a solution if you cannot afford. But I definitely recommend, if you're an organization that can either reach out to Salesforce or look at Salesforce's nonprofit suite. It can be a beast to kind of set up. I will say that it does take a lot. You have to be very tech savvy to at least get started with Salesforce. But going through TechSoup, I'm a big fan of Donor Perfect. Here at SUCUP, we are a big fan of Donor Perfect. If you have the means to, or you are able to write a capacity building grant to get something like
That's a good point.
To get something like Instrumental, where you have a built-in grant tracking platform, but you also have a built-in search engine to look for grant resources, that can be good. Also, some of the other grant search tools like GrantStation, they run promotions around around Black Friday. Like, you'll see GrantStation run a promotion where I think 1 year used to be like $200, but on Black Friday you can get like actually 2 years or 3 years for $200. So there's different tools like that. All of this information, I constantly, if you can get on a listserv, get on your local AFP groups. They sometimes have tracking or chat platforms where you'll see people ask questions, and then you'll see a whole string of people that have resources like these. But yes, project management software, if you can get one, will work great for tracking grants until you can graduate to an actual grant management system. And I think with that, we have about 5 minutes left. If you the slides will be sent out. The webinar will also be recorded and shared. So if you need to come back and reference it at SUCUP, if you have any additional questions that we didn't get to, you're more than welcome to email them in to us. Amy and I will hang out for another 5 minutes.
Sure.
And if you have any additional questions, you can feel free to drop them in the chat. But we really appreciate everyone joining us today. We hope you got some valuable information. There is a QR code that's going to pop up on the screen. If you guys can leave feedback for us, it helps us tailor these webinars to make sure that they work. If you loved it and you loved us so much, leave us a thumbs up or a positive feedback. That's always great too. We really appreciate that. We would love to continue to do more of these and have even more nonprofit professionals join us for these webinars. And then that'll be it. Thank you. Thank you, Roxanne. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone.